So welcome everybody. My name is Rudy Nuyts. I'm the immediate past president of the ESRS, the European Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgery. And it's my pleasure to start the moderation here of this symposium, the Cake Society Symposium of the ESRS on cataract surgery updates from the OR to patient outcomes. You've put together a program with four talks of Oliver Findel, myself, Anders Bendik, and Mor Dickman. And we are going to start with a pre-recorded talk of Professor Oliver Findel from Vienna, and he's going to speak on the important topic of sustainability in ophthalmology. If you now can play the pre-recorded talk of Dr. Findel, please.
Dear colleagues, thank you for inviting us to give these presentations, virtual presentations for this ESCRS Academy, as we call them. And I would like to start off by talking about sustainability in ophthalmology. And if you want also the low-hanging fruit, the quick and simple ways to reduce carbon footprint in cataract surgery. I think we all know about the current climate development. There is a very strong increase in temperature over time, and this has actually also resulted in these, you can see these average warming parts, especially in the northern hemisphere, and which correlate very strongly with the cumulative carbon dioxide emissions. So you can see that on the x-axis and the y-axis, you can see the actual temperature change, and over time, you can see this very, very strong correlation. And we know that there are a lot of impacts and associated risks of this increase, because that also changes the extreme weather events. And you can see the comparison of so-called hot days in different scenarios and in different regions of the world. And we also know that we have these heat waves and droughts, and then we also, like here, for example, the devastating fires which were in Australia just recently, 2 years ago. So I think there's no question that we need to try to reduce emissions. And the question is, what about surgery? Cataract surgery being the most common surgery. And this is an interesting study from the UK, and then comparing it to southern India. And what you can see on the left side is cataract surgery, and you can see that one cataract surgery operation with phacoemulsification results in 130 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per procedure, which is about 500 kilometers with an average European car. And on the right side, you can see the data for, in this case, India, also using phacoemulsification surgery, but only having 6 kilograms of carbon emissions. Which is about 25 kilometers with an average European car. So you can see a huge difference using the same, at the end of the day, the same surgical technique, but obviously differences in disposables and reusables in the operating theater. And here you can see a photograph actually of the waste which is being produced on one day in my department with cataract surgery, and you can see significant amounts of waste as we have them in the developed world. And this is actually, as I said, 1 day's worth of cataract surgery. And there's a nice ASCRS survey which was done with more than 1,000 ophthalmologists who responded, and 93% felt that OR waste is excessive, 91% were concerned about global warming, and 87% wanted their medical societies to advocate for reducing our carbon footprint. And then this was also published by David Chang. So where does this environmental pollution come from? And it turns out that procurement, so essentially the disposables, the materials we use, contribute to over 50% of the carbon footprint during surgery. So this is obviously a very relevant figure. One sort of interesting article which came out, like a white paper which came out quite recently from ASCRS, together with a few other US societies, was about the aim to reusing medications. So essentially the drops which we use to dilate the patients, local anesthetic drops during surgery and before surgery and also after surgery. And essentially what they try to advocate is that these drops should be reused for different patients, or if patients need drops to take home, then actually to be able to give them to take home. This is probably not so much of an issue in Europe, because I believe we've always been reusing drops for several patients as long as they're not contaminated. But I guess this is definitely of great interest to the US. Now here is the Aravind eye care system from India, and it shows actually the system of how they reduce carbon emissions and gas house emissions, and essentially mostly by reusing materials and disposables. And they have shown that their incidence of endophthalmitis after surgery is as low, not as maybe even lower than that which is published in the Western world, let me say. So we were interested in Austria to actually look a little more deeply at the cataract packs, at the disposables we use during surgery. We call it the Austrian Cat Pack study, which was sponsored actually by the Austrian Ophthalmological Society. And what we wanted to do is, in Austria is quite a small country, so we know all the surgical centers in Austria. These are all public hospitals. And this allows us to actually really assess the different packages in different hospitals and how they also deal with waste management. And of course, this is important. You need to analyze the materials. So we had several custom packs from different hospitals, which were sent to a company in Germany who is specialized in looking at materials and at looking at the global warming potential of these, and analyzed these in that process. So we then actually collected information and data from two major cataract pack manufacturers who cover more than actually nearly 82% of the hospitals in Austria. And we included essentially, as you can see on the left side, surgical gowns, cannula, syringes, knives, drapes and coverings, especially fluid management, surgical trays, and also the whole packaging for that. We did exclude phaco-cassettes and tubing and surgical gloves, because these are usually not in the packs, and then some other things which you may use here and there. And of course, reusables, should they be being used. And also, additionally, we did a survey of these Austrian departments, looking at their waste management infrastructure and waste separation, and I'll show you these results as well. So coming to the results, so we had altogether in these custom packs 22 different materials. Approximately 50% of those were plastics, and you can see there's very different types of plastics. And some of them actually cannot be recycled properly, but those were actually mostly in the contaminated part anyhow, which means they had to go to the infectious waste. What you can then see here is the actual, so these are 73,000 sets which were sold in 2021 by these manufacturers, which again, as I said, are market leaders. And we looked at 43 different cataract set compositions or combinations, if you want. And altogether, this adds up to about 600 grams per cataract set. And you can see that these are just the numbers of the sets. So obviously, there's some high volume surgical centers, and there's some which have lower surgical volumes. But more interestingly, if you look at the distribution of some of these sets, and looking at the smallest versus the largest packages, you can see that there's quite significant differences, especially in drapes and covers. So some only have essentially 2 drapes, or 1 table cover and 1 drape. And then there's some who have drapes, table covers, multi-purpose cover cloths, arm supports, and so forth. So huge differences concerning that. And if you look here now at the responses from the different departments participating, what you can see here is also looking at the waste, the way they take care of waste, Obviously, all of them have the classical, puncture-proof disposable containers for shops and have hospital waste. That's in 100%. But then you can see that there's actually some which don't, for example, have a glass container, which don't have a special waste container, which don't have paper containers or metals. So we see also quite some differences between departments in the operating theater as they deal with waste. Looking at the actual separation, especially of packaging material, we saw that 50% actually do try to separate that waste for recycling, and about 50% don't. So that's something which was also quite obvious in our analysis. Now, what could we do to change things? And so what we were thinking of is an idea of sort of doing a quantity reduction, because I showed you there were some small packages like this, let me say, it's like sort of a cluster of lower third, quite small compact sets with small drapes and so forth. And there were some very big, heavy packages compared to those. And we said, well, let's try to look at the lower third and the average of that and say that that is sort of like, let me say, a good standard, which obviously works very well for many, many centers. And then what would the others need to change in order to get down to that set? And so here you can see for fluid management, these are swabs, compresses, wipes, and so forth, knives, syringes, cloth, and covers. We can define this lower third, and then we can calculate that the weight difference actually, if all in Austria went to one of these, let me say, smaller compact sets, the weight difference already would be minus 18%. And if all these materials were essentially incinerated, meaning burnt because of infectious waste, you would have a 27% reduction in CO2 balance. And if you were somebody who was recycling as much as they can, it would be a 21% reduction. So significant reduction if all were to have a more compact cataract pack. And here you can see that the reduction of also size of these cloths and coverings, especially, because they account for about 50%, 53% of the total weight of a cataract set. You can see that these cloth and wrappings actually make a very large amount. And we looked at the variation of the size of these, for example, drapes, and you can see there's some huge drapes which really go down to the feet, and this is for cataract surgery. Often what we sort of analyze is that many of the centers said, this is the pack we've always had since many, many years, and it's worked well, so we haven't changed anything. And others have much smaller drapes, for example, which are probably much more than sufficient for cataract surgery. So again, if we now reduce to the lower third, so we make the drapes smaller, then that also, again, it gives us a significant reduction in CO2 balance. And if you combine that, having less articles inside and also reducing size of drapes and covers, again, we have significant reductions in CO2 relevant emissions. So what about recycling? Will that actually do a big change? Well, it turns out recycling also has an effect, but much less so. So we see less of an effect with recycling compared to the actual size of the package. There are, of course, like always, some weaknesses of the study. We only refer to cataract packages, so we're not talking about the phacocassettes and tubing and other things which are obviously relevant. And also, rarely purchased surgical materials from cataract packages were not included. So, like, for example, iris hooks or capsule tension rings or whatever are not included in this. And also, we have essentially analyzed the packages of 3 hospitals and have extrapolated those to the sales figures for 2021. So there may be slight variability concerning the products. So to summarize this Austrian study, there's a huge variability of cataract pack size and weight in Austria. reducing all these packs to the average of the lower third would reduce the carbon footprint by about 30%, and mainly by decreasing lumber and size of drapes and other cloths. And recycling is done in only about 50% of Austrian departments. Recycling probably has less effect than expected, but would obviously still be of benefit. Now, just to finish, the ESCRS has a strategy together with the ASCRS, the American Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgeries, and the AEO, the American Academy of Ophthalmology. We created a platform called iSustain. It's you can see it on isustain.org, and it's a global coalition of eye societies and ophthalmologists trying to collaborate to make ophthalmic care and surgery more sustainable. ESCRS, we're just starting a project on developing a sustainability index for disposables in cataract surgery, which can be used for tenders and benchmarking. And also ESCRS has started the initiative called Mission Zero to make our Congress more sustainable. And those of you who will come to Milan will actually see what we're doing. We're doing several things and changing things in our Congress to make it more sustainable. And finally, I would like to invite you to Milan. This is the meeting is on the 16th to 20th September. And as you can see, we have a lot of symposia, live surgery, video sessions, free papers, courses, more than 100 wet labs, practice management, 30 satellite symposia, and also on Friday, on the first day, we have an innovation symposium, which is about essentially industry and startups getting together with doctors to talk about the future, and also Cornea Day and Glaucoma Day. And with that, I would like to finish. And again, here you can see all these bags of 1 day of cataract surgery at my department, and we need to try to reduce that waste. And I'll be happy to discuss this with you. And thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Oliver, for sharing these important data on sustainability with us. We will have a discussion after the 4 talks, and I think the second talk is now going to be presented by myself on bilateral cataract surgery, and I would like to do that live, so we have to share the screen there. Let's see if this is going to work. Is this okay?
Looks good, thank you.
Okay, good. So it's my pleasure here to speak on bilateral cataract surgery in this symposium. These are my financial disclosures. I think that most of you would agree that the future of cataract patient journey is more leaner and meaner, certainly due to bilateral cataract surgery, but also because of some other developments like dropless cataract surgery and the introduction of digital means in the follow-up of patients. Let's see. COVID certainly had an effect on cataract surgery. We have seen, at least in the Netherlands, that there was an increased implementation of bilateral cataract surgery, ISBCS, so immediate sequential bilateral cataract surgery, that's the abbreviation, over the 2 COVID years, actually. And just to show you that according to the guidelines in the Netherlands, actually, we were obliged before COVID to have the 2 surgeries separated by 2 weeks. So that was called delayed sequential bilateral cataract surgery. And that was needed to have an impression of the refractive outcome of the first surgery before you were going to do the second surgery. While with ISBCS, we do the surgeries as completely separate procedures on 1 day. So just to show you what this has led to, in the DSBCS era, we did a pre-op consultation, then surgery, 1 week later, the consultation physically. Then 1 week later, the surgery of the second eye, 1 week later, physical examination, and at 4 weeks, we prescribed the glasses. So basically, 6 physical consultations of the patients. While in ISBCS, we do the pre-op physical consultation, we do the surgery of both eyes on 1 day. Then at 1 week now we have a telephone consultation with the patient, and at 4 weeks we prescribe the glasses. So only actually 3 physical consultations of the patient. So that means less patient visits, more effective workflow, and also less patients in the OR. And during COVID, that was of course very important. What do our fellow surgeons think in the Netherlands about ISBCS? Well, in the time period where ISBCS was still not allowed. So before COVID, 26% already was doing ISBCS, up to our surprise. While when we asked them, would you likely be doing this in the future? Almost half said, yes, I'm interested to do that in the future. Now, what are the drivers to perform bilateral cataract surgery? You can see here an extract from a publication in the Journal of Cataract and Refractive Surgery of our survey. And the important drivers are patient request, the advantages, so less visits to the hospital, less anisometropia after the surgery. You can apply the drops at the same time of both eyes. There's also probably some more efficiency for the organization. But what people think is really important is that you separate the two procedures actually. What is an important driver not to do bilateral cataract surgery? As you can see, that is still the risk for endophthalmitis, also mentioned risk for surprises and other complications, and potentially legal aspects, and also some financial considerations. Now, ISBCS was a hot topic during COVID in the editorials of ophthalmology. And here is the group around Steve Arshenov, actually, who, as you know, really promoted ISBCS over the years. They feel that ISBCS is less expensive, more efficient, faster visual recovery. And they really think that if you look in the literature, there is not an increased risk for endophthalmitis, and the refractive surprise with the introduction of the very universal formula actually has gone down that risk. So they really feel that you should discuss this option with the patient, and that the financial penalty for the surgeons by restricting the reimbursement of the second eye should be taken away. On the other hand, there is Sam Maskett, who said, you know, we still have a risk for endophthalmitis. There is medical legal aspects around this. We have a risk for wrong IOL power. There's also a negative dysphotopsia that could, of course, occur in two eyes. And then the surgeons should not be penalized if you're going to do that, leaving the bulk of the benefit to the third-party payers like the insurance companies. So a lot of hot debate around this. Now, we have looked in the literature, actually by Cochrane Library, under the guidance of Mort Dickman, who will speak later, and Lindsay Speckreiser. And this has recently been published actually in April. And what we've done is we have looked at safety, efficacy, cost effectiveness, and actually searched all the relevant databases that were around there. Studies from 2007 to 2021, we came up with more than 2,000 study records actually. And at the end, 14 studies were included, 2 randomized clinical trials and 7 non-randomized studies. And we did it according to a specific methodology, which I will not go into because of time reasons. But basically, the outcome was that in the ISBCS group, there was 1 endophthalmitis in 14,000 cases, and the DSBCS group, 55 in 550,000 cases. And actually, the conclusion here is that there is no increased risk of endophthalmitis with ISBCS. If you look at the so-called forest plots, you can see the 2 randomized studies here where there were no events. So there is no, in the forest plot here, and no actually square to delineate the risk ratio. But if you look at the non-randomized studies, you can see actually that the square is on the left side, which means that it favors ISBCS, indicating that there is really no relative increased relative risk with ISBCS in comparison to DSBCS. What about that other potential disadvantage? So refractive error more than 1 diopter. Also here you can see the pooling of randomized and non-randomized studies. And you can see that these squares here are actually right in the middle, which means that there is no difference in risk ratio between the percentage of eyes with refractive error outside the 1.0 diopter range. After our search and study, there came out some additional studies here. You can see 3 of these studies. One is of the American Academy Iris Registry, and then we have one in Scandinavia and one in Canada. But basically, the outcome here was the same. There is no significant difference in endophthalmitis rates actually between ISBCS and DSBCS. What have we done in the Netherlands? We performed a bilateral cataract study over the last 2 years, where 10 hospitals actually participated with 865 patients included. And here the primary idea was to look at that refractive surprise issue. So what was the percent of eyes in the second eye with a 1.0 diopter of target refraction there? And in addition to that, we had some secondary outcomes looking at visual acuity, complications, and also cost effectiveness. The inclusion here of these study eyes was really let's say the normal routine cataract patient. So no previous surgery, no ocular comorbidity, and eyes that were within the 21 to 27 millimeter actual length. So no eyes outside of this range. Patients were treated according to the OR guidelines of the so-called ISBCS organization, which means that there was a strict separation of procedures, instruments, and intraocular medication and solutions used for both eyes. There was a standard administration of intracameral antibiotics, mostly being cefuroxime, and routinely we did right eye first, the left eye second. Just to show you some practicalities, reusable surgical instruments went through different autoclaves, different cycles also, and the custom packs actually had different batch numbers, different colors also, so green for left and blue for right eyes to make it easy. Some of the outcomes here, looking at the refractive outcomes, so the eyes, the second eyes within 1 diopter and half a diopter, you can see that 1 diopter in yellow DSBCS, in dark blue ISBCS around the 95% level, 0.5 around the 77 to 79% level, so non-inferiority for ISBCS. Looking at visual acuity then, these are the mean visual acuities of uncorrected and best corrected distance visual acuity. Also similar values actually for uncorrected and for best corrected distance visual acuity for both groups. Finally, looking at the person of second eyes who have uncorrected and best corrected visual acuity of at least 0.8 Snellen visual acuity. For uncorrected, that's around the 50% level, as you can see here. And for best corrected, that's around the 90% level. So also here for this group, no difference. Complications, we had no cases of endophthalmitis in this smaller group. There was one case of bilateral corneal decompensation in a DSBCS patient that developed 6 weeks after surgery. We had one case of bilateral uveitis in an ISBCS patient, which also developed quite late after 10 weeks. And one case of bilateral macular edema in a DSBCS patient actually developed at 4.5 weeks. And then there was some comparable mild effects like dry eye and dysphotopsias in both eyes. So not really a significant change between other complications for both groups. What about costs? So we have done some cost effectiveness analysis. I will not go deeply into that, but just to give you some impression of the cost, if you look at the difference in surgery time, there was a slight advantage of ISCS being 17 euros cheaper actually, if you measure that time-wise. The big difference was if you apply the daycare admission fees, of course, there is 1 day for these for ISBCS because we do both eyes together, and 1 day, 2 days for DSBCS, and that makes up the largest difference of 300 euros. Then we have fewer postoperative visits, minus 56 euros, fewer home care because you can do the drop application at the same time for both eyes, minus 25 euros. Lower travel costs of minus 10 euros. So that means that overall there is a, let's say, roughly 400 euros advantage for ISBCS in comparison to DSBCS in terms of costs. What was an eye opener for us? These are the 10 centers, as you can see here. And this is the mean total OR time, so including in and out for ISBCS versus DSBCS. And as you can see here, for most centers, actually, there's not a lot of difference, which means that most of the centers already have a very effective manner of treating patients in a DSBCS mode. What did the patients say? We had focus groups. There were a lot of advantages. Only 1 time surgery needed. Post-op care trajectory is faster. Shorter application of drops in both eyes simultaneously. Quicker prescription of glasses, and these are some of the advantages. And actually, in the reported disadvantages, there was not a lot of comments. Patients did not see the risk of complication as a disadvantage because they said, if you separate it, can also occur in the second eye, and they are actually right if you look at the complications that I listed before. The longer stay in the surgery room was not experienced as negative, so that was also positive. What about eligibility? In the literature, you can find figures around 71% of eligibility. In our centers, so we have one tertiary care center, ISBCS now accounts for roughly 30 to 35% of cases, and in a general hospital, it's around 50 to 55% of cases, so really quite an uptake. Conclusions and take-home messages. Current evidence shows that ISBCS is not inferior to DSBCS. It is cost-effective. The patient experience is very positive from what we hear in the study, but also outside of the study. It is a suitable alternative for DSBCS in selected patients, so please remember the inclusion criteria. You have to adjust your flow of patients and all your pharmacology drops, drugs, solutions that you use, and you need to have good communication throughout your organization. Oliver already showed you Milan. We hope to see you there either physically, but certainly virtually if you cannot make it. And with that, I would like to thank you for your kind attention. Okay. So then it's my pleasure actually to introduce the third presentation. That's going to be given by Professor Dr. Anders Bendik from Sweden, and Anders is going to talk on intracameral antibiotics, and I think it's a pre-recorded presentation. Anders?
I'm Anders Bendik, professor in ophthalmology in Umeå University, Umeå, Sweden. I would like to share with you today intracameral antibiotic prophylaxis in cataract surgery. I have no financial interest. First of all, intracameral antibiotics is a Swedish invention. I never fail to mention that. The Swedish National Cataract Register has registered endophthalmitis after cataract surgery since 1998. Intraocular antibiotics such as cefuroxime, moxifloxacin, and ampicillin reduces the POE rate significantly, which we have been able to show through our register in many years. Other risk factors for postoperative endophthalmitis include high age and capsule rupture. The studies performed by the National Cataract Register in Sweden contributed to ESCRS performing the large European multi-center study, which I will come back to shortly. Now, these are the endophthalmitis numbers for the different years in Sweden. We started out in 98 with 0.106% endophthalmitis cases, and in 2020 we are down to 0.0095%. Of course, these are very small numbers, but as you can see, the big jump here in endophthalmitis frequency is between 98 and 99, where we saw this rather impressive reduction, and this was the year we started using intracameral antibiotics. Now, 0.106%, 0.0095%, these are very small numbers, as I said, and what do they even mean? Another way to look at it is if you do like 1,000 cataract procedures per year, you would have to work for 0.9 years to see one single case of endophthalmitis with a 98 numbers, whereas in 2020 you would have to work for 10.5 years to see one single case of endophthalmitis. And what does this mean? Well, simply, we can't really draw any conclusions from our own practice. We have to rely on large registries and large studies to draw any conclusion on endophthalmitis prophylaxis and frequencies. These were the cases we saw in 2020 in Sweden. As you can see, enterococci and coagulase negative staphylococci comprise about half of the cases in Sweden. And these bacteria are inherently resistant to cefuroxime. So we can't really see an increased resistance from using cefuroxime. Rather, the bacteria that cause endophthalmitis have always been resistant to this antibiotic. This is a rather crowded picture, but we can focus on the 2020 numbers. 72% roughly of the cases in Sweden today get cefuroxime intracamerally. 28% get moxifloxacin intracamerally, and 26% approximately get ampicillin intracamerally. Usually ampicillin is used as an additive to cefuroxime or possibly moxifloxacin to take care of the enterococci specifically. Now, this is a study performed with data from January 2002 to December 2004. That is 3 full years. We did about 250,000 cataract procedures in Sweden during this time, and saw 109 cases of POE, and which means that during this time we had a frequency of 0.048%. But in the cases where no intracameral cefuroxime was used due to perhaps allergy or other reasons, the number of endophthalmitis was 0.35%, 8 cases out of 2,315 procedures. So this clearly shows that without cefuroxime, the frequency of endophthalmitis is higher. And among these, the gram-positive bacteria represented almost 90%. This was published in Ophthalmology. Now to the ESCRS study. As you know, this was a prospective study performed in 24 centers. Austria, Belgium, Germany, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Spain, and Turkey, and the UK. And this was done from September 2003 to January 2006. Originally, 35,000 patients were planned, but the study was stopped at the intermediate analysis when 16,603 patients were operated. So all patients in this study received povidone iodine 5% drops into the conjunctival sac and onto the cornea for a minimum of 3 minutes before surgery, and levofloxacin eye drops 4 times daily for 6 days starting the day after surgery. This should be remembered. These are the 4 groups, and if we just look at them briefly like this, we can see that the groups that got intracameral cefuroxime had a lower endophthalmitis rate than the other groups. And there was no difference if levofloxacin drops was used preoperatively or not. Other retrospective studies have been done in different countries. For example, in France, they have analyzed 6 million cataract procedures. 2005, 0.14%. 2014, 0.044%. This was published in Ophthalmology too. This is without and with intracameral cefuroxime respectively. In UK, they did a study of 36,000 cataract procedures, comparing subconjunctival cefuroxime to intracameral cefuroxime, and you can see the numbers here. India have done 2 major studies. The first one with 600,000 cataract procedures with or without moxifloxacin, and you can see without moxifloxacin they had a number of 0.07% endophthalmitis, which is impressive in itself. But with intracameral moxifloxacin, the number was down to 0.02%. Second study with the same numbers included 2 million cataract procedures. This is from Spain, 13,000 procedures, and you can almost see here which year they started using intracameral cefuroxime, from 2006 and on. And the last study is from the United States, no cefuroxime 0.31%, with intracameral cefuroxime 0.014%. So, to conclude, intracameral antibiotics cefuroxime, moxifloxacin, and ampicillin have been used in many millions of cataract procedures all over the world. And side effects are extremely rare. POE rates are reduced by a factor of 3, 5, or even 7 in different studies. And we should also add that in countries where intracameral antibiotics have been used for a longer time, we can see that POE rates have dropped further in recent years and gradually over the years, as in Sweden, because of better surgery, because of younger, healthier patients, and so on. But the fact that intracameral antibiotics have an effect remains true also today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anders, for this very nice and interesting talk. And then we are going now to continue with the talk of Mor Dickman. Mor Dickman from the same clinic where I come from, University of Maastricht in the Netherlands. And Mor is going to speak on quality assessment for cataract surgery and the importance of registries. Mor.
Hello, my name is Mor Dickman, and I thank you very much for the kind invitation to share with you today the work of the ECRS registries on quality assessment for cataract and refractive surgery. So why are registries important? They are important because measuring is the basis for improvement. If we do not know where we are, our results, and if we do not know where to go, and one always needs to get better, how shall we ever improve? Clinical quality registries systematically monitor the quality of healthcare by routinely collecting, analyzing, and reporting health-related information. This information is used to identify benchmarks and outcome variance and inform improvements in healthcare quality. So why is outcome variance so important? This chart shows there is substantial variation in hospital outcomes across these countries. In Sweden, for example, capsular complication rates in cataract surgery varies by 3,100% depending on which surgeon and which clinic is treating you. Unfortunately, data from many countries is missing, and patients and surgeons are deprived from accessing these results with benchmarks to evaluate their outcomes, compare with peers, and improve. Registries provide us with a mirror to improve, an opportunity to benchmark our outcomes against colleagues in our clinic, our country, and even across Europe. They provide a safe platform not for blaming and shaming or stigmatizing, but allows us to learn from peers and encourage and incentivize improvement to the benefit of doctors and patients. Much of our knowledge on cataract surgery comes from registries. Registries teach us on practice patterns within and between countries. They collect clinical outcomes on vision, refraction, complications and their management, and also patient-reported outcomes. Registries are a source for new discoveries and a platform for performing controlled trials. They teach us on the uptake of new treatments and are a valuable source of information for regulatory decision-making. EURECO is the European Registry of Quality Outcomes for Cataract and Refractive Surgery. EURECO provides a platform to audit surgical results and encourages surgeons to adjust their techniques and improve their outcomes. EURECO is a multinational registry for cataract and refractive surgery. It is funded by the ECRS with initial support from the European Union. The platform has been launched globally, and all ECRS members can access it free of charge. The EURECO contains important clinical parameters, but also patient-reported outcome measures for both cataract and refractive surgery. One important use of the database is for benchmarking with results of other surgeons, clinics, and countries. The steering group is committed to analyzing aggregate data. Since EURECO started in 2008, the number of contributing countries varied between 14 and 16. Data can be entered online via the ECRS website, via direct interface with electronic medical records, or through national registries. This figure shows the number of accumulated cataract and refractive surgeries in the EURECO database over time. 1 million cases of cataract surgeries were achieved in 2011, 2 million cases were achieved in 2016, and 3 million cases in 2019. In 2020, above 150,000 refractive surgeries were registered into the database. By collecting data, surgeons can monitor their own results over time. EURECO provides a unique opportunity to monitor and compare outcomes. Collecting data also allows surgeons to make an audit report, which is a new functionality on the website. The EURECO database also allows surgeons to anonymously compare their results with other colleagues, clinics, and countries. On the left, you see a comparison of visual outcomes, the percentage of cases with corrected distance visual acuity of 0.5 Snellen or better. On the right is a comparison of refractive outcomes, the biometric prediction error. Each bar represents only one clinic. The green bar shows the requesting clinic. Please note that only part of the clinics in the database is shown. Long-term standardized data collection and a very large number of cases makes it possible to use EURECO for research. The steering group has released 16 publications to date, and I would like to share with you a few recent examples of our work. Posterior capsular rupture is a feared and potentially sight-threatening complication of cataract surgery. Analyzing data from a very large sample from the EURECO, we have shown that the incidence of PCR decreased significantly from 1.4% to 0.6% of the last 10 years. We also identified important risk factors for PCR, such as corneal opacities, diabetic retinopathy, and poor preoperative visual acuity. Moreover, we showed that although vision and refraction are worse in patients with PCR, shown in yellow, vision improves significantly compared with baseline in these patients. At the same time, the risk of other complications such as corneal edema, endophthalmitis, and a high intraocular pressure was higher in patients with PCR. Existing scoring systems have shown promising results in reducing PCR rates. In a recent study, we examined if a machine learning model for risk assessment could help predict posterior capsular rupture more accurately than traditional methods such as logistic regression and a Bayesian network. We found that the multilayer perceptron, or MLP network, shown in green, predicts PCR the best and performs much better than a previous scoring system shown to reduce PCR rate by more than a half. Implementing machine learning models such as the MLP network for risk assessment could help reduce complications, especially in teaching hospitals. Finally, a few words about some new projects. Last year, a unique partnership was signed between the French Cataract Registry, standardizing a digital tool that compares real-life patient-reported outcome measures, or PROMs, which has been adjusted to severity profiles, integrating France into the EURECO registry. As of this year, the Dutch Society of Refractive Surgeons will also be using the EURECO system to report surgery cases. And the ECRS Toric study, led by Paul Rosen, will use EURECO to randomize patients undergoing cataract surgery with low expected residual astigmatism to receive either toric or non-toric IOLs. The European Cornea and Cell Transplantation Registry was established in collaboration between the European Union, the ECRS, EU Cornea, and the European Eye Bank Association. So far, we've collected 13,000 records from 15 countries, including donor and recipient characteristics, surgery, and 2-year outcomes, including PROMs. The registry is free of charge and allows the users to create reports and benchmark their outcomes against European data. In conclusion, the ECRS registries offer a one-stop shop to monitor results over time, a web-based platform to collect clinical and patient-reported outcome measures that allows monitoring and comparing results with colleagues, clinics, and countries anonymously and safely. Based on data from the registries, evidence-based guidelines. In addition to EURECO and EasyCTR, the ECRS recently launched Eureka, a registry for pediatric cataract surgery led by Professor Marie-Josée Tassignon. I hope this talk convinced you on the value of registries for quality assessment and improvement, and kindly invite you to visit our new website and register your interest at www.registries.ecrs.org for full information on the ECRS registries.
Thank you very much, Mor, for this interesting talk, showing the importance also and the, well, I would say magnitude of what ESRS has been doing in terms of registries in the different domains of the anterior segment. I think we have now some time for discussion. Everybody is here for the Q&A session. I don't know from the organizers how long that we have for discussion. Could you tell that to me?
No problem. You can take a few minutes for Q&A or discussion.
Few minutes? Okay. Well, then just start with the first one. Oliver, you're there to join us. Welcome. Good morning.
Morning.
Sustainability, important topic you address. We are going to address it in Milano quite extensively in different sessions, actually. Looking through the differences, and we've done some work ourselves also between UK, what you've done in Austria and India. Do you really believe that the Indian situation is comparable to the Western European situation? I know that they use the same knives for many surgeries. They use the same cassettes. They use reusable cannulas, etc., etc. How does this fit with all the regulations that we have in Western Europe? Because I mean, just for our department, or the Netherlands, it's strictly forbidden to use reusable cannulas during cataract surgery if you have disposable replacements available.
Well, I think the point is well taken. I mean, this would need a lot of proper studies which show that the safety really is the same, and I think this is not going to happen soon or quickly. However, having said that, thinking about the cassette, for example, and the tubing, you could theoretically have the same cassette in a machine and just change the tubing from surgery to surgery. And that already would be quite a significant reduction. And you can actually go one step back and just look at the sets, the cat packs we all have with disposables in there. And we did that for Austria, actually. We did an assessment, as I showed, and there's a lot of variability. And just reducing that variability, going down to, let me say, sensible, standard, small pack, that already has a lot of impact. So I think we have to take these, small steps first, which are actually big steps, but easy to do. And then we have to try to tackle the really difficult one. And that's the one you said, could we have the same situation as in India? Well, definitely not at the moment, but maybe in 10 or 15 years' time.
Yeah, point well taken, I think. We have actually formulated in the Netherlands a best practice for cataract surgery, taking away the gown from the patient, making slow, as you said, smaller drapes, etc., etc. Very important. Let's go to Anders. Anders, welcome. Good morning. You dressed up quite nicely in comparison to us this time.
Yeah.
Listening to you, I mean, just want to confront you with a topic that came up now very recently in the Netherlands, actually. There is a pharmaceutical company who wants to bring out actually a combined corticosteroid antibiotic product for post-operative application after cataract surgery. And the authorities who need to give them access to the market, say, we don't know if that's really needed anymore. Is there any additional value above what you are doing? This brings up that whole discussion again, because if they are not allowed to enter the market, the existing medicines that are there to do this will be removed from the market and not reimbursed anymore. So there's quite some fuss about this. So what's your take on the value of post-cataract drops antibiotics? Should you still be doing that? Yes or no, based on the previous studies, ESRS and endophthalmitis study, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry to nail you there, but
well, the short answer is no. We shouldn't be using antibiotic drops after cataract surgery. It hasn't been shown that it has any effect, and things that are not effective have not been proved to be effective. We shouldn't be using. So this goes for the ESRS study. We have a lot of data from Sweden in our register. We have the data from all over the world basically supporting this. But as I said, the numbers are very, very low, and it's difficult to make a huge randomized trial, prospective trial to really prove this once again. So what we should do is basically we should trust the study that we already did, namely the ESRS study, I think, and go according to that and not use post-operative antibiotic drops.
Other short question, vancomycin in the anterior chamber, is there still a place for that, given the potential side effects in the back of the eye?
No, I don't think so. And vancomycin shouldn't be used as a prophylaxis. It's a sort of last resort when it comes to antibiotics. So it shouldn't be used as a prophylaxis at all.
Okay. More, yeah, you heard Anders. I would say registry studies, if we do have the appropriate parameters listed there, probably could give the answer to that topic of value of postoperative antibiotics in cataract surgery, if we have hundreds of thousands of eyes available, because otherwise we will never know the answer definitely. What do you think?
I think the European Medicine Agency recognizes the value of registries for pre and post-marketing authorization of medication, and that's just because of the reasons that just been mentioned. It's impossible to capture in randomized or prospective clinical trials, not collecting data from different countries, the information needed to guide decision-making. So it's important that I think we address this issue. In Sweden already the parameter list includes a medication. I think we should do that also in the Netherlands. And one of the things that for me was interesting hearing Anders's lecture is that you do not see an increase. I was wondering if you see any increase in the resistance, and from the rates that you see, it doesn't really seem so. I don't know if you have something to say about that. So I think that's another value of using intracameral antibiotics versus using topical antibiotics postoperatively, that you can really increase the resistance by doing so.
Yeah. Other final question to you. We all look, just coined the name, very jealously to the IRIS registration of the American Academy of Ophthalmology. So where are we there with our registries? Are we going to be able to connect these to our EMRs in the European landscape with all these different EMRs, countries, regulations, people, cultures?
I think we need to consider the differences between the American landscape and the European or global landscape, where there are issues of multiple EMR system, multiple languages, multiple dialects within the same country, European regulation related to privacy. So I think before we can reach an IRIS registry in Europe, at least, some significant investment, at least in the technical area of interoperability, needs to be done. And that's an issue that cannot be addressed by our society or others. It's really an issue that has to be addressed from the European Union level, and we can influence it by lobbying for that. And in the meantime, I think there are very interesting options for collaborating with IRIS registries. So we're looking forward to doing that.
Yeah, I would completely agree. We have to correct the errors of the past of our governments who really did not engage into this very important development. And now, we have to try to see how we can correct that. Well, I think, we got a very nice session here that we presented to our Cake Expo Society, and interesting discussion. And I thank you, Anders, Oliver, and more for making time here on your free Sunday. I hope all the attendees enjoyed the discussion as much as I did, and I wish you a very pleasant Congress and a good Sunday. Thank you very much. And we hope to see you in Milan, physical or virtual. Don't forget it. All right, thank you.
Have a good Sunday. Bye.
Bye.